Let's do this. Welcome, everyone. I would like to, I'm grateful today to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territories of many nations across the province. And I'm privileged to be joining from the unceded territory of the Secwepemc First Nations, Williams Lake First Nations. So welcome, everybody. We're going to start today just with a little bit of housekeeping. Harpreet, can you put up the... Perfect, thank you. So just a few housekeeping. As you're aware, we are recording this. If you can keep your mute on, that would be wonderful, unless of course you're speaking. And then if you have any comments, we do have somebody that'll be monitoring the chat box. So if you can, if you have something to say, please put your chats in there. That would be great. We'll be conducting a few polls over this time period. So if Harpreet will be bringing them up and you can just follow the instructions accordingly. And of course, if you need any tech support, have any problems, there's the email address there. And am I missing anything else? We have a quorum. I think we're good to go. Is there anything else that I might be forgetting, Leanne?
Yeah, I wonder if you can invite members, staff, and guests to introduce themselves so they can put their name and their location, their land acknowledgement in the chat box so we know who's in the room, and also for the minutes.
Yes, I should mention that we actually just finished a dress rehearsal and that was mentioned in there. So thanks, Leanne. So if everybody can do that, first and last name and the location that they're zooming in from. So nice to see. Great. Okay, I'll just give everybody a little bit more to introduce themselves and where they're from.
Oh, and it looks like we may have lost Lori due to a canine situation. So my name's Leanne Morgan. If we haven't met before, it's nice to meet you. I'm your executive director here at the Rural and Remote Division, and I am going to do a little bit of a bylaws refresher. So my sincere apologies for those of you who are bylaw aficionados and have memorized them cover to cover, but just for the rest of us, just a quick little refresher. We have a few membership categories at Rural and Remote. The most important are the voting and the non-voting members in the membership classes. So if you are a general member, a member at large, and you are a practicing physician or nurse practitioner, that means that you are eligible to vote. If you are an associate member, so a retired physician, an actual retired physician, not you, John Souls, who is still actually working, then yeah, retired physicians and NPs or residents are not eligible to vote, but you are welcome, and I'm so glad that you're here. Just a reminder, as much as we might get caught up in the enthusiasm, guests, our wonderful primary care transformation partner, provincial leader, Marina McBride is here, along with our provincial engagement partner, Cheryl Druich-Chesney is here. They won't be voting, I won't be voting, my wonderful staff colleagues. I just want to point out, we have a couple of folks who are supporting this meeting. So we've got the wonderful Harpreet Kular, operations coordinator on tech support. So Lori flashed the email address. We also have the talented and delightful Linda Anderson, who is our documentation coordinator. We have Catherine Brown, who is monitoring the chat feed and helping Jim Beattie with sort of Q&A during his questions. And my gosh, I'm sure I'm forgetting someone and I'm going to be so embarrassed later. But we have confirmed that we have a quorum of 15 members, and that just as a reminder, majority is required to pass a resolution. So Lori, I think that's everything in the bylaws refresher, and I'll turn back over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Leanne. Had to stop a dog from barking. Okay, so just a Zoom voting refresher, if we could go to that, thank you. So if you're moving, to please use your virtual hand and say your first and last name. The seconder is to use your virtual hand and say your first and last name. And then we're going to go into a poll, which is pretty self-explanatory. It'll be put up on the screen, and that's where you have the opportunity to say if you're in favor or opposed. Great. Next slide. Okay, so the AGM business meeting will now begin. And can I get the, we're going to start with the motion for the approval of the agenda. So the agenda of our 2022 annual general meeting be approved. If I could have a mover, Tracy, thank you. And the seconder, Liz, thank you. And now we're going to put it up on the screen so we can all have the opportunity to be in favor or opposed. All right, 100% in favor. Awesome. This is working good so far. Thank you. All right, and now we have a motion, and that's the approval of the minutes. And the minutes of the annual general meeting held on September 29th, 2021 for the fiscal year 2020-21 be approved as circulated. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Tracy. Seconder. Thank you, John. Nice to see you. And now we're going to go to the poll. All right, this motion has been 100% in favor. Thank you. And now we are going to move into our executive director's report. Take it away, Leanne.
All right, thank you so much, Lori. And I feel very uncomfortable in those long pauses, so I don't know if I'm alone there, but I just want to say I feel very awkward without music or dancing or something. So executive director's report, you would have had the opportunity to receive the annual report in your inbox. And in addition to sort of a recap of really what's been a whirlwind of a last year, there's a couple of things that I wanted to highlight for you. And so one of those, you see this beautiful graphic right here on our screen, and that is our division's new strategic plan. So this is a culmination of years of work in the making. It's the second strategic plan that the Rural and Remote Division has had. And I think it really demonstrates in a lot of ways the maturity of the organization. It provided an opportunity for us to take a look at our mission, vision, values, and strategic priorities, and to consider member input, all of the important evaluation work that we've done over the last couple of years, and really to represent ourselves and put our best foot forward with respect to, you know, Tracy's credo of a rising tide lifts all boats, which has just unleashed all of these nautical puns and jokes in me that I really can't stop. So sincerely apologize for anybody that's not into that. I actually had some music that I was going to play for you tonight, but I had some technical difficulties. So the song is called Float for anybody that knows it. And so essentially it's a country music song. It came on the radio when I was driving from Kelowna to Revelstoke probably 7 times, and so I've learned it well, and I will send it out with the package after. But I think really that representation, a river, a lake, or a castle with a moat, you know, we want to just float, and that's really the vision for the Rural and Remote Division. As we move into our key accomplishments for this year, I'm going to talk about benchmarks and key performance indicators and all that nerdy stuff. But really what that means is that we're continuing to see growth in the organization. So what we can see is that of our 163 members last fiscal year, 126 of those folks were engaged through either attending a chapter meeting, being involved in a project, being at the AGM, doing something, which, you know, as compared to some other peer division, that's a very high proportion of members. Most importantly, and as you can see from the graphic there, I think that's a good representation of what it looks like when a rural physician is leading a project. So we had 59 members who were involved in a leadership capacity. So whether that leading a project, being a chapter lead, being on the board, being a regional physician lead. And so that's a 5% increase from last year, and also really important when we consider things like succession planning, think about burnout, you know, not wanting to ensure that it's always the same folks that are leading projects. So really wonderful growth there. And in addition, the number of projects that our division was involved in grew. And so some of that is thanks to our friends at the GPSC and the JSC and the shared care committees for giving those opportunities, but also a lot of leadership at a local level from physicians, from partners, from staff. So we increased 10% over the previous year. We've now come to the musical component of tonight's program. And so when I was thinking about highlighting the relationships, and this is something that I kind of joke about, so for anybody that, you know, takes themselves really seriously, you're probably going to get uncomfortable. I like to take the work seriously, but I refuse to take myself seriously. So I've chosen to repurpose our holiday card from this past year, which much credit to our very creative communications guy, Jason Kieran, who's not here tonight, but he's just a hoot. And shout out to Christiane Kearns, who is on maternity leave at the moment, but still representing. So I think the best way to highlight our relationships is in a song. And so I haven't got up to 12 yet, but I'm working on that for the December season. But the Rural and Remote Division has 9 CSCs, and potentially 2 more at some point if the physicians decide that's what they want. 8 shared care projects, including the projects that have finished up and also the application that Revelstoke is working on. 7 expressions of interest for primary care networks, even though one of them actually is held up for a signature. 6 long-term care initiatives, although 2 of them we just got the funds transfer agreement today and they haven't been able to start, but congratulations, Bella and Hazelton. 5 LHPTs, local health planning tables in collaboration with Health Authority and Indigenous partners that feed up to a structure in the interior rural CSC involving the communities of Clearwater, Ashcroft, Lillooet, Lytton, and Merritt. 4 regional physician leads, including Dr. Marius Mostert, who's joined us from Fort Nelson representing the North. 3 early draw NPs, 2 expressions of interest approved, interior rural CSC and Revelstoke, and 1 CSC has received their data. There we go.
Oh, wait a minute. I think we need to go get off mute and have a little bit of a round of applause here.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Leanne. That was
DM me for collabs, because I'm you know, working on that. And for those who are aware of my I'm working on a little ditty that's called A Rural GP to the tune of Under the Sea. Anyway, so for anyone who's been dancing with the lobster, thank you for that. And for anyone that doesn't know about the stuffed lobster, just wait. I'm going to get into a couple more serious things just for a little bit, not to freak anyone out. But one of the things that I think is important is that our board of directors has struck a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And so one of my reservations, being a white settler and a woman who comes from a background of privilege in many respects, is that I'm not interested in performative allyship in organizations, and I'm not interested in just putting things down on paper. But I think with the leadership of our board of directors, the leadership that we have from physicians on the ground who have been, even probably before there was a word for diversity, equity, and inclusion committees, have been walking the walk and talking the talk and working in culturally safe and humble ways for a long time. We have that committee. And so in addition to a lot of, great, successes, one of the things that you'll hear about a little more from Dr. Liz Wynot is that we have a fantastic slate of candidates. And so I'm pretty proud to say that we're led by a board of directors where women of color and Indigenous women outnumber white men 3-1. And that's with all great respect to white men. Dr. Don Sutherland is one of my favorite old white dudes. But I really think that by leading, by having representation from the communities we serve, it's incredibly important. I think the other piece where Rural and Remote Division is leading is with respect to our cultural safety and humility and recruitment and retention projects. So as many folks know, the GPSC has arranged a funding opportunity for us this year. But last year, which we're sort of talking about those successes, our board of directors used some of our infrastructure residual to have 2 of these projects. And so we're fortunate enough to work with Stephen Reichert and Catherine Coda from Reichert and Associates to ensure that we have an interim evaluation of those projects so that we can share information amongst the chapters and improve so that we're ready to put our best foot forward and create things at a community level that are most impactful. And then the last sort of provincial accomplishment that I want to highlight is the stabilization of the patient medical home report. So this was really, sort of a labor of love from our chapter support team, which is our regional physician leads and our co-chair, Dr. Tracy Thorne. And so we again had the opportunity to work with Reichert and Associates to really be very creative with respect to our PMH innovation funding and to do a project that talks about what factors stabilize the patient medical home. And so some of the key takeaways for me were that 36% of our members are international medical graduates, 60% of our members are burnt out, and only 15% of our members are recruited through the formal sort of recruitment channels through Health Match BC. So thank you to everybody who participated, either through a key informant interview or a survey. And that report gave us some terrific recommendations that we are implementing this year. So in any case, those are some of the highlights that I wanted to share. Thank you so much for humoring and indulging me with my singing. And I think I'm ready to turn back over to you, Lori.
Great. That was fantastic. And the accomplishments are pretty amazing. And I know you didn't have time to list them all, but those key ones are really reflective of the work that has been going on in the last little while. Thank you very much, Leanne. So now we're going to move on to the treasurer's report. So I'm going to hand it over to Connie soon, but the following financial statements, they reflect the position of the division at the fiscal year end to 2021-22.
Thanks, Laurie. Thank you, Leanne, for that, for the song. I can't promise I can share any songs, but I will try to spice up these financial statements as much as I can. So it's my pleasure to present the treasurer's report, which includes, as Laurie mentioned, the audited financial statements of the division for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2022, along with our 2021 comparative period. So we can move on to the next slide. So it's a little bit of a busy slide, hopefully it's a little bit hard to see, but what this is a snapshot of the division's audit report. which is signed by the division's independent auditors, Smythe LLP, which is a reputable CPA firm. The division received a clean audit opinion, which was signed June 29th of 2022. What this means is that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects, the financial position of the division. So behind the scenes, I know it's just a signature on there, but behind the scenes, a lot of work was done. So I just wanted to acknowledge management. I wanted to acknowledge the finance team for all their hard work to get us to a clean audit report. Auditors perform various procedures. I was an auditor in my past life. I'm a CPA by training, so I know the amount of work involved in getting a clean audit opinion. So I congratulate everyone who was involved in that process. What this means is that the accounting records are accurate and they're in compliance with Canadian accounting standards for nonprofit organizations. And so again, if we can move on to the next slide, congratulations on that accomplishment. This is the statement of financial position for the division, and also known as the balance sheet for the year ended March 31st, 2022 and 2021. I just wanted to highlight the cash positions under the 2022 column. There's $898,000 in cash and another $537,000 in cash provided by funding, which is a total of $1.43 million, a very healthy cash position. And this is made up of, this is liquid cash that the division has. And in just moving down the line items, GST receivable, it's $17,000, which is up from last year, $7,000. And this is just a function of the activities, additional activities that has happened in 2022. So with obviously more spending, more activities, the division can claim back eligible GST, which was paid out. Moving down the line to our liabilities, the accounts payable and accrued liabilities, line item $375,000. What these are amounts that we owe vendors, staff, physicians who have rendered services in that period, but due to timing, the division has not yet paid at that time when we close the books. And then that line item, deferred revenue, $550,000. This is the government funding line item. That comprises of actually unspent funding received by the division, which are eligible to be carried forward for the following year. And we will talk a little bit more about that amount later on. And then just below that line item, due to funders, $316,000. This is the amount that we need to return to the funders. And again, where management has tried their very best to retain everything possible while still being compliant with the funders' requirements. So this is the amount that's left to be able to pay back. We'll discuss a little bit more on that last slide on these ongoing government funded projects. All right, if we move to the next slide, we'll discuss quickly. I'll share with you the statement of operations, which is also our income statement. And our total revenue line item is $2.337 million, made up of mainly of government funding of $2.315 million and a small amount of interest income that we receive and GST rebates that we receive as well. And then on the expenditure side, we have more projects in 2022, which means there's an increase in our expenses in all of the categories listed there. Just want to highlight that as we see more COVID relaxations throughout the past year, in-person events and meetings kind of occurred again. So expenses we're seeing increased slightly higher over last year. As well, increased marketing and job posting costs with more activity in the year as well. So you'll see those the variances compared to 2021. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. This actually includes note 7 of our financial statement. This financial statement package was sent out as well to all our members. This is a great snapshot of where we are with our government funded projects. All the projects are listed there, and it's been a busy year with lots of great activity. Division has done a lot of exciting things happening to support the initiatives. Just want to highlight that column on the right, due to funders. That amount is the money that we actually owe back to the funders. And I want to highlight that there's one line item for physician change management to GPSC. Having to return $225,000, and that's mainly as a result of COVID, with forums that ended up being via Zoom instead of in person. It didn't meet the requirements, so we have to return that money back. And having said that, the division hopes to carry forward $550,000 of this funding to the new fiscal year, with lots of exciting plans to support the important work of improving patient care in the rural communities. So, I mean, to wrap this up, I think our auditors have done a great job. They understand our division's accounting issues and operational issues at hand. So we do recommend reappointing them as auditors for 2022-2023 fiscal year. And let's take a pause right there to see if there's any questions from anyone on these exciting numbers. Harpreet, do you see any hands up? I can't see everyone on my screen.
I don't, there's no hands at the time.
Yeah. All right, sounds great. Everything's crystal clear, perfect. So I'll just move on to the next slide there and pass the time back to Lori.
Thanks, Connie, and thank you for that. Yeah, it's such a delight having you as our treasurer and taking the time to do this, and a big, huge shout out to the finance committee as well. So we have a motion, and that is the approval of the financial statements, that the financial statements of the Society for the year ending March 31st, 2022 be approved. We have someone who would like to move that. Thank you, Liz, and second that. And NS, thank you. And now we're going to take it to a poll for you to be in favor or opposed. Thanks, Harpreet. All right, 100% in favor, carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Now we have a second motion, and that is the approval of the auditors, that the membership of the Rural and Remote Division of Family Practice Society approve the appointments of the firm Smythe LLP as auditors for the 2022-23 fiscal year. Thanks, Tracy. To move it, second it. Connie, thank you. And we're going to take it to the poll. Great, 100% in favor, carried. Thank you very much, everyone. We're getting pretty good at this poll. Okay, next slide. And this, I'm going to hand it over to Leanne, and that is the bylaw amendment rationale.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much, Lori. As I alluded to earlier during the musical number, we had a new chapter join the Rural and Remote Division. So just as a fun trivia game, does anybody remember the last chapter to join before Fort Nelson and what year it was? And you can't answer if you're that chapter. Hands, anybody? Chat feed? Gonna leave me hanging? Okay. It was Merritt in 2018. And before that, it was Revelstoke in 2017. And I'm not going to count backwards on the whole timeline, but it had been a hot minute since we had added a new chapter. And so we were super fortunate to have Dr. Mostert and Diana Penny, who's our chapter coordinator, present to the board of directors, but we didn't quite get the ink dry on the addition of them as a chapter before last year's AGM. And so it is in the bylaws, it's permissible from time to time for the board to support a community, but this is just making it official. So this is, I guess, going from an engagement to a marriage, or however you want to put it. Okie dokie, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, so we have a motion for the approval of the special resolution number 1. And that is the special resolution number 1, adding Fort Nelson chapter be approved as submitted. Thank you, John, and a seconder. Thank you, Tracy. And we're going to put a motion up to either approve or not.
Speak now or forever hold your peace if you have any problems with this union. Dustin Hoffman is not at attendance at this AGM.
Thanks, Leanne. All right.
And if anyone doesn't get that reference, we're just, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. Okay. So we have 100% in favor. So this motion is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, and so the second special resolution, try to say that one 3 times fast, is the name change for the Southern Gulf Islands chapter. So this chapter is formerly known as the Salt Spring Island chapter, but one of the outcomes of a retreat that they had earlier this year was to change their name to be more inclusive of some other Gulf islands, including Main Island, Saturna Island, Galliano Island, and Pender Island. So back over to you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thanks, Leanne. So we have a motion, and that is that the special resolution number 2, name change, Southern Gulf Islands chapter, be approved as submitted. Thank you, Liz. Seconder. Thank you, Aaron. And now we're going to take it to the poll.
I'll just fill this awkward silence with some information that you may have heard from the division formerly known as the Powell River Division has chosen to rename themselves the Cathett Division of Family Practice because of some harmful colonial legacy that Mr. Powell was named after. So just reminding everybody that if at any time you want to change the name of your chapter, you are empowered to do so.
Just a question on that poll. I find it right confusing. Why are there two choices? I'm not sure the right question came up.
Yeah, I was confused too. I just did one. Aaron?
Harpreet, we've got a poll related conundrum. Is that something you can assist us with? Have I pushed the wrong button?
Sorry, I was doing some technical work. Can I hear that question again?
So there
seems like something's gone gobbled with the poll.
So it said choice 1 or choice 2. And
that was my fault. Give me 1 minute and I'll redo that. Just one moment.
Thanks, Harpreet.
You know, any errors that Harpreet may or may not make is usually cleaning up a mess that I've made. So thank you very much for your patience with me. And yes, I am. What can we say? It's just technology. Am I right?
Yeah. Hey, no problem.
So as far as renaming your chapters, if you're so inclined, you could use the territory or, Wakanda. So Harpreet's redoing the poll as we speak, Liz.
Well, the choice 1, choice 2 choice came up again. So
it's down.
Harpreet, do you want to kick it old school?
It's here.
Oh.
Good job, Harpreet. Thank you, everyone. We are 100% in favor of this, and this motion is happily carried. Thank you very much. And if we can go to the next slide, please. All right. So next is we're going to get a report from the Board Development Committee. And today who's going to be providing this report is Dr. Liz Wynot. Thank you very much for stepping in, Liz. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. And I would ask my other committee members and the ED to help me if I blow it here. The Board Development Committee is obviously a committee of the board that has several responsibilities that generally I understand it as our job to support the board's ability to conduct its governance responsibilities as well as possible. And that includes things like reviewing committee terms of reference every year, looking at the bylaws and whether we need possible updates to keep us on the right track. We have to prepare a way of evaluating the board, or we do a self-evaluation at least, and there may be other mechanisms that we use. We look at what skills we think we need on the board and develop a skills matrix, and ultimately we advertise for candidates when we have vacancies on the board, and we review those applications against the skills matrix, and we interview applicants and we recommend new directors. So I'm going to talk just about 3 bits of this. One is with respect to board nominees. The first thing I want to say is that we are sadly saying goodbye at this meeting to Lori Walters, our wonderful chair, and Dr. Kate McCarroll, who have been on the board for several years. And I must speak as a person who's just been on the board for 2 years, and I have so appreciated the approach that they've taken and their skills. So, but that leaves us with 2 spaces. And so over the last several months, we solicited candidates and narrowed on the basis of applications down to 4 people to interview. And as I said, matched them against what we thought we needed on the board. And we came and selected, and we'll be recommending to you two candidates, Dr. Aaron Carlson and Dr. Asush Shivkumar, to recommend as new board members. And both of these physicians have extensive experience in family practice in rural communities in BC, which we think is at this time is so important. And they both have participated in leadership and advocacy initiatives in support of rural and remote family practice in different parts of the province. And their leadership includes extensive community engagement, as well as lobbying to inform government about the crucial issues affecting community-based physicians and how to begin to address these issues. So I'm going to rely on Leanne to put up the motion eventually, but these are the people that the Board Development Committee and the board are recommending to you. The other thing to notice is that I'm sitting here, I'm providing this report in place of Diane Dunsmore Farley, and it has been our privilege to have Diane, who is not a board director, participating and in fact leading on a couple of board committees. And this has been a wonderful kind of learning for all of us. And I want to express my gratitude to Diane and to another non-director committee member, Guanbin Yan, who have both been so helpful on the development and policy subcommittees. And this year we will be adding another candidate who put a name forward for the board, but we have instead invited her to participate as a committee member. Her name is Lena Hozaima. I think that's it. We have actually also implemented an evaluation. I'm not sure we're reporting on that at this meeting, but that's what I have to say in Diane's place. I don't know, Leanne or Lori, if you want to add anything to that.
No, you did a wonderful job. Thank you so much, Liz. Leanne, did you have anything else that you would like to add?
I was just going to thank Liz for stepping in a moment's notice.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is your slate for the 2022-23. We have Nola Jeffrey, Connie Leong, Dr. Aaron Carlson, Dr. John Sutherland, Dr. Tracy Thorne, Dr. Sush Dr. Sush Shivkumar, and Dr. Liz Wynot from Galiano Island. So Galiano Island, Lytton, Gabriola, Victoria, Vancouver, and Lanceville. Thanks for that slide. And now we get to have the opportunity to approve the slate of candidates. The membership of the Rural and Remote Division accept the slate of candidates presented. Is the motion? Thank you, Tracy. A seconder. Thank you, Liz. And now we're going to take it to the polls. Liz, did you have a question? Oh, okay,
No,
okay. And a 100% in favor. So this motion is carried. And you know, it is quite a process that we undertake in going through this process, as Liz mentioned, and the interviews and the candidates that came forward were pretty outstanding. Being on that committee and going through and the interviews, it's really awesome that there's that interest in being involved in this amazing board. So thank you very much and welcome. Okay. Well, that wraps it up. We have some acknowledgements and I'll pass that over to Tracy.
I get to have the fun part tonight. I don't have to do any of the business because that's been Lori's job for a couple of years. I'm Tracy Thorne. I'm co-chair, physician lead for the Rural and Remote Division of Family Practice for the last couple of years. And I'm going to acknowledge the people we're saying goodbye to tonight. And one of the things that's been really beautiful about our board since I joined over the last 2 years, anyway, in my experience of it, is the connection and the friendship and the kindness that it has been. And so anyone, our board gets these meetings, we meet fairly regularly, almost monthly. And then when we add in our committee meetings, it's a constant connection that we're making with one another. And we've had a really beautiful time doing that. And any of our guests who've been to our meetings hopefully got that same sense of positive tone. And that's really been set by Lori Walters as our co-chair, who has always approached everything with her heart on her sleeve and a really deep connection to what's valuable for communities and physicians, and a really tremendous way of ensuring that all of us are comfortable and welcomed and doing the hard work that we're doing, and also making sure we're doing it with a sense of grace and with a sense of clarity around the fact that we need to take care of ourselves and our members as we do that hard work. So Laura, I don't know what we're going to do without you. You keep us on track and on business and do all the dotting of the T's and the hard things that most of the physicians don't really know about or really have much time or interest in. And I think it's really important to acknowledge in this call that our governance board, in our transition to a board that is not fully member driven and is not fully physicians, we've been very groundbreaking in that across the divisions spectrum in the province, and the ability to welcome Lori is probably I think I would say, and be right, the first non-physician co-chair of a board of division of family practice. And I think that made some people uncomfortable initially in the idea, but it in no way compromised the vision or scope of the work that we did in supporting primary care family practice in our rural and rural communities. And it really just showed all of us that the work that we do isn't just about the physicians that do the work. It's also so important to keep in mind the community members and community leaders that value so much what we do and really, really need us. And Lori has been the face of that for our division, and really an inspiration for other divisions to see a way forward with non-physician members really contributing to our work and making it easier for us, because she's definitely increased our capacity as a board and our capacity as a division. She has knowledge that none of us physicians would ever be able to bring to the table. And we really will miss you, Lori, and we've really loved your work and your input. It's had a vast spread and really set the tone for how we operate. So thank you for everything that you've done for us. And for me personally, I can speak to many things. I won't, because it'll make us both cry, but that's just the way we work. And then our other member that we are saying goodbye to, I'm not saying goodbye. I think we're just saying we'll see you in a bit, Kate, because Kate McCarroll is our physician lead in Revelstoke and has been a board member with us on our board committees for the last 2 years as well. And Kate and I go way back. We were baby physicians together, medical school together, ended up in the same province and in the same places just by overlap a lot of times. And Kate has such a powerful leadership in her just really deep respect for the work that she does and for the people that she works with. She really speaks with a lot of weight, because you know that everything she talks about or everything she brings to the table is deeply considered and very, very important. And so, Kate, we have loved working with you and having you on our committees and on our boards, asking thoughtful questions and really maintaining such a strong sense of social justice and personal respect for the people around the table with you, and ensuring that we did the same at our tables. And you are going on a wonderful adventure, and we wish you all the best in that adventure, and really hope that you find your way back to us when you return to your community after your time away. But really, both of these women have contributed tremendously to our board and to our division as a whole, the strategic plan, many of the projects that we've worked on. And I don't know where we'd be without you, but we welcome the new members with as much excitement as we say goodbye to our older members, and hope that as alumni, we can always come to you when we need something extra. So I hope invite everyone to join me in a little applause, visually or whatever, to both Kate and Lori, who have really worked hard for all of you and made tremendous differences for our division over the last years on the board.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And Tracy, wow. gonna miss this board, and the membership should be very proud of the board and the amazing staff that you have at the helm. Am I using that right, Leanne? What is it? Okay, it's somewhere on the boat.
At the helm, in the crow's nest.
Okay,
You go.
perfect. It's been 4 years on this board, and have never felt like I haven't been welcomed as part of the team with both of the boards that I've been on. The last 2 years of chairing have been an honor, and absolutely right. The meetings that we've had have been, it's a safe place and space, and we all appreciate each other so much and the work that we all do. Our meetings are I'm hoping, board meetings can be a little tricky at times and serious, but when you have singing people like Leanne and others that are contributing onto the space, it's just been yeah, I can't compare it to any other board I've been on. So thank you very much to everybody, and again, thank you for the kind words, Tracy. Okay. We will
Does Kate want to say anything?
Are we going to let Kate get away without saying a final goodbye to us as a board? I would like to. I would like to make sure Kate.
I wasn't sure if that awkward silence was for me to jump in or not. But I just want to echo totally what Lori has said. It's been such a pleasure being on this board. I've learned so much from everybody on this board. I think the new members to the board are just going to see what an incredible group of people this is, and I know that the board is in great hands with everyone that's going to be there next year. And yeah, off on a little adventure, but definitely won't be too far. So I'm sure I'll be back and working with all of you again in the near future. So thank you.
And a definite super welcome to Erin and Shush, who are joining us. We're excited to have you and on our team. And I hope, as everyone else who's listening, there's opportunity in the future. This is a great board to be a part of, and our subcommittees are also fantastic. So if you see yourself having a role in this kind of leadership and governance of the board over time, just keep coming to the AGMs, keep participating locally, and then I hope to hear from you on a provincial level going forward, because every person that's joined us has had something remarkable to contribute.
Awesome. Great. I don't want to provide any more awkward silence. So next slide is to adjourn the meeting. If I could have a motion to adjourn. Oh, Leanne.
I'm not making a motion because I can't. And we just all got caught away in the spirit, and we had a non-member as the seconder of the auditor. And so just wondering if there's a member that is also okay to have their name in the minutes. John Souls, thank you very much. Your name and lights.
Thanks, John. All right. All good to adjourn, Leanne? Okay. Motion to adjourn the meeting. Mover, please. Moved by Nicole, seconded by Liz. And then we'll just put it to our final pollster.
And remember, the fun has just begun, so please don't escape, and you don't want to miss this wonderful opportunity next.
That's awesome. All right, 95% in favor and 5% opposed. So carried. Okay, so now we are at our entertainment section of the agenda, or of the no agenda. We are just moving on to Jim Beattie.
Sure. So Lori, thank you so much. I'm just going to jump in. Liz, can I just verify, is that a legacy hand, or did you have something, did you have a comment?
Legacy, I just so lazy to take my hand.
You're losing blood flow. So anyway, for those who have been paying attention in the media recently, or even if you haven't, it's been in the news a lot that there's some challenges in the healthcare system, specifically in primary care. And if you've been watching, as I do, it's always a delight and a surprise, but yet not a surprise to see members of this division. So you may or may not know that we have some terrific physicians in this group who do a wonderful job with media relations and have done for years. Just a handful that I want to mention, Dr. Carrie Marshall of the Long Beach chapter, in addition to the local work that she does on Tough City Radio and did so throughout the pandemic. She was also featured in the Globe and Mail. We had Dr. Dan Cutfeet interviewed by the CBC, talking about his experience on Cormorant Island, leading an all Indigenous physician team. We had Dr. Chris Applewhite very recently on CBC talking about administrative burden associated with being a physician. We've had Dr. Chi on the news talking about ER closures in Clearwater, and I'm certain I'm missing someone. So we have a great amount of expertise in this room. And given the work of a rural physician, primary care, acute care, long-term care, consults at the grocery store, et cetera, you are really the face in a lot of cases of healthcare and the system. And so in addition to all the wonderful skills that you bring, we also had an opportunity through our wonderful friends at Doctors of BC. They have arranged for a wonderful media trainer. So we have Jim Beattie, who's going to introduce himself, but he has that cool broadcaster voice. He actually trains the presidents of Doctors of BC. And so hopefully, he'll have something to offer you. I know that he will. And probably he'll learn a thing or two from the wisdom in this room, and also, as always, an opportunity to learn from one another. So without further ado, Jim, I will over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Leanne. Yeah, that's my broadcaster voice jumping in. This is I've been paying attention. I've been here for the last 15 minutes, and this meeting is like a love-in. So I hope the love continues. I hope that Harpreet doesn't put up a poll, to vote me off the island or something like that. But yes, we're going to talk about media training, and this is all about you, all about all these faces that I'm seeing for the first time. This is all about you. So if you have questions, jump in, interrupt me. I don't mind. I will answer whatever I can. But I thought I would walk you through a PowerPoint. How do people ask questions? First of all, is it putting up a virtual hand, or do people just want to jump in? It doesn't matter to me.
Well, I'll be the first to jump in because I'm shy, Jim. So I just want to highlight that we have the lovely and talented Catherine Brown, who's our Interior Regional Manager, and she will be monitoring the chat. So in the event that, you see a message in the chat and you want to respond to it, you do you. But Catherine is also there at the helm to be able to bring those conversations in. And usually the norm is that folks put up their hand and then you call on them and they take themselves off mute. But, this is a group of very, respectful and competent people. So I trust that it'll all probably work out with without too much governance.
Okay, well, I'm happy to. I'll do my best to watch for those hands, but anybody who wants to jump in, just go ahead and do so. So first, a quick introduction of myself. As Leanne mentioned, I'm a former journalist. Here in BC, I was the bureau chief for the Vancouver Sun and the legislature for 10 years. I was the bureau chief for CTV News in British Columbia, here on Vancouver Island. I'm in Victoria. Then I was the chief news anchor for Czech television on Vancouver Island. And after that, I began working in the world of corporate communications, first for a large company. Then I started my own company, and I do I do media training, things like this, but I do strategic communications for organizations. I do a lot of crisis communications, things of that nature. And I've been working with the doctors of British Columbia for around like 5 or 6 years, training all of your presidents over the years, Dr. Kudeski and Dr. Ross and Dr. Dosanjh and Chow. And I'm currently training your incoming president of the Doctors of BC. And I've also done a series of talks and lectures and support for others within the organization and the communication staff. So that's a bit more about me, but I want to share my screen, which I think I'm going to be able to do, and just begin walking through a PowerPoint with you. Can everybody see this? I hope so. I'm just trying to. I'm going to make my screen bigger here so I can see some more of you. Okay, all right, that's good. All right, let's I'm doing my best to watch for those little hands that pop up. So when I do media training for the president, it's a little bit different what we're going to do now. This is kind of like media training light. We're going to dip our toe into strong communication skills. The things we're going to talk about aren't just about media. It's about a whole range of communication skills that you can use in your community. If you're going to a public meeting, people are angry about a walk-in clinic closing. You can use these. I just talked to some doctors in Prince George, and they were dealing with their MLA, their head of the health region, and they had to do a little talk in front of them. These are the kinds of skills you can use there at a board meeting, or in a media interview. I've never seen a time in this province where we've seen more demand to have doctors interviewed on the crisis that's facing our province, particularly in family medicine. So I expect many of you have already had calls, or you may be getting some calls from media about the effect in your region. So here is, I'm just playing here. Here is what I was hoping to touch on today, and I want to just do a quick overview of the media, how it's changed in my 30 years, how it's changed from when I began. I want to talk about what makes a story, and give a little bit of insight into what a journalist, sort of a day in the life of a journalist. When you know what they're dealing with, it can help cater your message. If you want to get a clear, concise message out, having a better understanding of what the person on the other end of the line is dealing with can help. Then we're going to talk about key messages, what they are, how to draft them. Sometimes you have to draft them on the fly. Think of them quickly. Sometimes they're going to be handed to you from the executive director of the division, saying, here, this is what we've said in the past. Sometimes maybe you'll ask the doctors of BC, what is our key message when it comes to, safe supply of drugs, or what's our key message regarding, opioids? Then at least you'll have some context. We'll talk about those key messages. Key in all this is how to stick to your message. You've got a message, you want to deliver something, but the person on the other end of the line, the radio show, a talk show host, they don't want to listen to your key message. They want to get you talking about something else. How do you stick to your message? How do you answer a difficult question? So we'll talk about some of those things. We'll talk about some pitfalls, and then I've drafted a few key messages just from having monitored the debate, the narrative over family medicine in this province. And I've just drafted a couple of key messages that we can look at, we can discuss. But throughout everything, I want you to ask questions and stop me and so on. So we don't have time to ask everybody for personal experiences here, but does anybody have any personal experience with the media? I know Leanne mentioned a number of doctors that did, but I don't know if those doctors are here with us. But do people talk regularly to your local media outlet? Anyone? Not really. John? Can't hear you, John.
I would say yes, but it varies, and the level of media varies, and so and the reasons for it vary a lot. But I think most rural physicians will at some point in their career be asked questions, but even if it's by the local paper or CBC in one of its local settings. I think that's really common, and I think that's one of the reasons why we want to do this, is because we do want to do it well if we're going to do it. And I think for every person that actually does it, there's probably several others who are asked but aren't sure how to participate properly and are uncertain as to the skill in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, because you are leaders, especially probably more so in a rural community, that you're going to get asked than in a large urban community, that you would get asked. But you are leaders in your community, so that's not uncommon that you would be asked to do these kinds of interviews. So we don't have time to talk to about everybody, but if anybody wants to share a good experience, a bad experience, feel free.
I'll share an experience.
Please.
So I'm Alex Natters. I'm in Port Hardy. It was advocacy in recent context of COVID, and there was a pediatrician and another physician in Toronto that became quite notorious, I guess, in terms of social media, in terms of speaking out against COVID vaccinations. This was early on. It's August 2020. Anyways, I'd formalized a complaint with the individual's college, and then I was contacted by CBC The National, and it became a story that a few of us rural physicians were featured on pushing back. But it was sort of interesting how it all worked out, because these two physicians ended up suing 20 of us, including about 15 different doctors and national columnists. So it was interesting to see the CMPA in the end did support us. But it certainly speaks to potential vulnerability and advocacy, even on something as clear-cut as COVID vaccinations. And I think it's important that divisions also speak up and support physicians through that advocacy.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see you talking, but is it Alex? Is that what you said?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. So when you talk to, I don't know the history of all that. That sounds like a big and complicated, complex story. I don't know all the intricacies of it. But what was your dealing with? Sorry, how would you describe your relationship with the media? Did you get a fair shake? Was it nerve-wracking? What was that like?
Yeah, the media was great. We had basically CBC National, one of their senior reporters, who engaged myself as well as two physicians in Ontario, and so yeah, very engaged and appropriate. And then when this lawsuit came down the pipeline, there was a big push from CBC with anti-SLAPP legislation. So they were actually quite supportive. But as John Soules put in the chat, CMPA did come on board, but they were quite slow to respond and come around to that. But it was an interesting experience for sure in terms of all the media and everything that's come since, because it's been quite a national story.
Yeah, and it shows how it can happen. You know, you are working away. You know, Alex is in Port Hardy, rural community, the northern end, pretty remote northern end of the island, and all of a sudden he's on the national. That's pretty amazing. When I did the training for Dr. Kadesky, he went to Hawaii with his family, and it wasn't long after we'd done the training, and he had, just before he left, he said something about, it was long before COVID, but it said something about vaccinations for children. I think it was something to do with, you know, children, 16-year-old children should be able to consent to vaccines like flu vaccines without permission of their parents or something like that. And he did 24 interviews on the beach in Hawaii, national interviews. I mean, he touched a nerve. People wanted to talk. So it shows how you know, you as a profession are in demand. People want to hear what you have to say. So thank you for sharing that experience, Alex. If you do get a call from the media, or if you're doing a session with your local chamber of commerce, it doesn't really matter. If you're in a public forum talking about issues, we're hoping that you're going to be closer to the right side of the slide that I've just put up. You know, feeling a bit more confident, a bit more in control. Comfort is a relative thing. It often doesn't feel comfortable to have lights and a microphone stuck in your face, to be on a live radio show. It's you know, but those nerves, that nervous energy, can have very good results too. But the only way we get you to the right side of that slide is really taking you over to the left side of the slide and talking about the strategy, asking some basic questions. Why do you want to do this interview? What is your message? What do you have to say? What role does this division or does my practice play in this story? Would this be a better, would an obstetrician be the right person to comment on this particular story, or a neurologist? Is it really asking some basic questions, not just agreeing, saying, what is our strategy? How does this promote our divisions? Then once you've got that, you've figured out, okay, yeah, we have a place here, we have to advocate on behalf of family physicians. Then you marry that with practical skills, the kind of things that we're going to talk about today, and then hopefully we're going to be a little bit closer to the right-hand side of this slide.
Jim, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted
please.
to note that Erin Carlson has a comment in the chat just regarding some of the clips and some of her experiences with the media. I'm not sure, Erin, if you want to speak to your comment or ask Jim.
Please.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I was just mentioning it, I got involved a little bit with some advocacy for family practice, and getting an interview, you can have such a great some great points and conversations, but it's always interesting to see when it actually gets aired, how little they might take from that. Yeah, so I'm just interested in hearing what you have to say. That's all.
Yes, well, it was funny. I was doing this training with somebody last week, and he was regarding forest fires, nothing doctors, forest fires, dry conditions and stuff like that. He gave the reporter, the camera crew, everything, told them about the dryness and the parks and the this and the that, went through everything. And then right near the end, he picked up some kind of a twig and broke it, said it's dry. And that's the only thing they used on TV. He just had him breaking this thing. It's dry. It's really dry. And he was ticked off because he did so much work and so on. And so he didn't get much FaceTime. What I would say, and it sounds like, Erin, that may have been something similar to what you had to deal with. But here's what I would say about that is that, yeah, sometimes you do get in the audience, sometimes you get burned. Yeah, you only get a 3-second clip. But more times than not, the information that you're giving the reporter, the news crew, the producer that calls you in advance, you're setting the narrative for the story. So when the reporter's voice is on, Tinder, the reporter's voice is going, Tinder dry conditions, there hasn't been this much rain, this is the driest August on month, all that stuff. All that information might have come from that guy. All the background might have come from that guy. Erin, you might have set the narrative for the story that you were involved in, but for the casual observer that watches the story, oh, Erin really was a bit player, when in fact, you might have provided all the background to that thing. So what I say to people is, if you want to play a larger role, the earlier you contact the reporter or the producer, the earlier you contact them, the more likely it is you will play a significant role in the narrative. And I mean by that, if you call them back at 10 o'clock in the morning, they're putting their story together. They're writing it, they're putting it, and you can play a significant role, giving them some background, telling them what's going on. If you call them back though at 4:30, right before deadline, they've written the entire story, and they've saved one little spot for the rural and remote physicians. They've saved one little area. You haven't written the top part of the story. They might have gone to the critics or the minister or whoever else to write the story. So that would be one tip. The earlier you get in, the more likely you're going to you're going to influence the shape of the story. Hopefully that helps. And Catherine, thank you for that. Feel free to jump in at any time, because I'm not watching everybody's hands here. But the slide that we're seeing now about the reality is the media is very different today than it used to be. The reporters are working, the journalists are working. It's a 24-hour news cycle. They're filing all the time. In some ways, there's no deadline, because there's always a deadline. There's always a deadline to put the web story up. So, you know, it used to be we'd get both sides of the story and then publish the story. Well, now it's you're putting the first story up, the first go round up, and you're just waiting for the second side. So imbalanced stories do get put up on credible news sources, and there's no pretense that it's a balanced story. It's the first, you know, this news has just happened, this plane has just crashed, the plane has crashed, and they'll tell what's happened, but there'll be no, Air Canada won't play a role in that because Air Canada didn't respond. Then Air Canada responds, and then it comes on in the next iteration of the story. So reporters are working on shorter deadlines. The reporter that interviews you, Aaron, for example, let's say you do an interview with the Vancouver Sun. You do the interview with the Sun. Well, the reporter who's going to interview you is going to write a story for tomorrow's hard copy of the newspaper. The reporter's also going to write a story for the website and keep writing updates to that story all day long. That reporter will probably be doing an interview on Zoom like this, and some of the clips that you say could well go up on the Vancouver Sun's website. Then they might have a partnership with a radio station, and they'll take this clip and they'll send it to the radio station. So they're working on multiple platforms at the same time. The reason, and they're their own researchers, there's no one doing research for reporters. It's a bare bones operation. The reason it's important to know this, to have an understanding, is the easier you make it for those journalists who are calling you, the more likely your version of the story, or you're going to be quoted properly, directly. If you make them work hard, if you bury your key message, you give them 10 minutes of background, and then all of a sudden you come up with a nugget of news or a great quote, you've buried it. So front end load your messages, put things up front, repeat them. Keep them simple. Only give a bunch of background if you're asked for more background. There's ways to cater the message to the demands that the journalists have who are going to be calling you. So that's your best. I would say that's one of the keys to ensuring that they report what you want them to report. There are a number of keys to success in doing an interview, or in doing a public event, appearing on behalf of the divisions. Again, goes to that strategy. What's your message? What do you want to say? What do you want to leave your audience with? If they could only remember one thing or two things, what is it? So it's putting some thought into what your message is, what you want to deliver. And it could be, you've already got a bunch of key messages. Every British Columbian deserves a family physician, right? Or, people who have family doctors are healthier, have healthier outcomes. There's things that are, there's some basic messaging that you already know, that you already have, that you can continue to use because they're good and they're solid and they're relevant. Number two, this is about preparation and practice. Just doing this, being here is about preparation and practice, but it goes beyond just being here and doing this. The preparation and practice can happen more often. If you're going to do an interview, I say, if you're going to do the CBC radio show, Gregor Craigie here on Vancouver Island, let's say Alex is going to do that kind of an interview. The interview is at 8:10 in the morning. Have somebody ask you some questions at 8:05. It only has to start 5 minutes earlier. Have somebody ask you some questions. Get your brain engaged. Ensure that when that real first question comes, that you're going to give a real response. It's not you're not warming up, you're ready to go. So that's the kind of preparation. And then have, you can have one of your colleagues, your spouse, it could be anybody, it could be a neighbor. In fact, it's sometimes better to have people who are not insiders ask you some questions, because it's going to help you anticipate, what do people really want to know about this subject? And sometimes we all do this. We get caught up in our own little world, and we get caught up in. I was dealing with somebody yesterday, and they're really caught up in their deficit. And I hope the media doesn't ask about our deficit. And it's like, well, you know what? The media doesn't know you're in a deficit. So that's an internal question. Don't worry about that stuff. Let's worry about the most likely things that are going to come forward in a media interview. Execution and delivery, we're going to talk about some of those skills today, how to improve those skills, how to ensure your message gets out, gets heard. But number 4 is the most important thing that we're going to talk about today. It's the number one thing I'd love you to remember from today, is that it's not question and answer. Question and answer can happen in school, where the teacher asks a question and everybody puts up their hand to answer. That's not what a media interview necessarily is. It's question and response. You have an obligation to respond, but you don't necessarily have to answer. If you can't answer, of course, answer the question. But sometimes the answer doesn't serve your interests. Sometimes they're going to ask questions that might be a personnel issue, confidentiality, a legal issue. Sometimes the question is going to be political. You might have a clear view, a clear position, but you shouldn't be, you may not want to say it. You may be reluctant to wade into politics. So it's far better, or the question simply could lead you down a rabbit hole. It might be a good question and you might know the answer, but it might take this entire interview off course in a new direction. It's important to remember, and this is something it's hard to get if you haven't done a lot, is it's question and response, not necessarily question and answer. So I hope you'll remember that one. And the last one, the business transaction. I don't worry about this with this audience, but with some people that I train, I do worry about this. Business transaction, all I'm really trying to say is that an interview typically is going to be about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. The journalist or the question asker, a public meeting, the question asker might have an agenda. They might have a bias. They might be angry about something. They might be contemptuous. They might be sarcastic in their question, what have you. When you remember it's a business transaction, you're only there for 3 or 4 minutes in an interview. You can't control their question, their tone. All you can control is the way you respond. So keep that level tone. Keep a level presence. Be happy with the way you answer the question. So and don't rise to the bait. Don't rise to the bait and try to get into a fight with a talk radio host, because that's what they want. They're looking to poke you, to prod you, to be provocative, right? We all know doctors are fat cats, right? We all know you guys are BMW driving, like that's the kind of preamble that can fire people up. Just recognize that it's a bit of a trap. So don't fall into that. Don't fall into that trap. You're there for a strategic reason. Go and get her done. So does it all make sense? Anybody, any questions on those keys? Does it all make sense? All right, let's move on. Sorry, Nicole, did you have your? Nicole, are you?
Yeah, I thought I would ask a question. You had said something that prompted me when you talked about catering to the demands of the reporter. And I think, as Aaron preluded to, sometimes you say a whole lot of things and the narrative is changed, is already set. And the concern is always that you're going to be misquoted or out of alignment with the division of the health authority. I guess my question is that, what do you do outside of avoidance when you know the narrative is set and you are likely to be quoted out of context? One of the examples I have is that, you know, there was a Times Colonist article written with my name in it that I didn't actually even know was published until weeks after the fact, that took direct quotes out of a written document that nobody sought my permission to write. It just got taken out of context and published. And that's the part that becomes very cautionary when physicians are approached by reporters. And it causes a certain amount of moral distress because you want to say something, but there's that inherent resistance because you know that that narrative is already preset and there actually is, you know, demands from the reporter to get the story out that he or she wanted to get out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, there's a number of points there. I mean, first, I would say people. I believe what I've experienced. People worry more about being taken out of context and being misquoted. They worry more about it than it actually happening. Not to suggest that your incident wasn't real or anything like that, because I don't know the details of that. But I'm saying that there's a lot of fear, a lot of worry. We build up this head of steam that I'm going to get misquoted and so on. Many times when people are quote unquote misquoted, what I have found is that they didn't like what they said. They said it, and they didn't realize that the reporter would take that versus what they hoped they would take. That in many times has happened. In fact, I just wrote an article in which somebody, and the person who I wrote it, you know, looked at it, didn't like it, didn't say she was misquoted because she wasn't misquoted, because I taped everything. Journalists usually do tape what they do. So I sometimes think what happens is that we all are guilty perhaps of talking too much and revealing too much. And sometimes the misquote isn't in fact a misquote, it's a misstep by the person who is being interviewed. So that's my honest answer from what I have seen on both sides. I've been on both sides. On the issue that you were talking about, where you were quoted from a report, again, I don't know the details of that, but if the media acquired a report in which that you have authored, that you've written, that you're quoted in, or something like that, there is an obligation. They have to quote that, you know, accurately, but they don't need your permission to use that. That's again my experience, unless it's a sensitive document or something like that. But in the media, I loved getting documents that people didn't know I had, and then quoting directly from them. That's you know, so again, I'm not sure what the details are, but does that help? Does that help, Nicole?
Yeah, I think it's just a you know, point of conversation, because when I say, like, I think doctors want to be part of the solution in general, but when you are at risk of being taken out of context, it just makes it more challenging for physicians to come forward and be that forward voice and to be that representative of their colleagues. It surprises me a lot that, you know, reporters can quote you out of a document that wasn't intended for public relations. And I guess the big question is that, you know, what do you do next? You know, my understanding is that you just let it ride out. And sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow when you've been represented in a way you didn't necessarily intend to be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm happy to talk even offline to know more about it, because I don't have the background to you know, to be able to offer an informed comment on the report. Leanne, did you have a comment?
Thanks so much, Jim. And, you know, as a person who's never spoken out of turn, I feel like this is an appropriate time for me to speak. I'll just pause for the laughter. I guess, Nicole, one of the things I want to say that you mentioned, because you said, I don't want to say anything that's out of line with the division. And so I just wanted to clarify for everybody. I mean, I don't know who the division is. I'm not the division, like I'm Leanne, but the Rural and Remote Division Society, our board has passed a media relations policy. And so basically what the policy says, and we can, send it around as a refresher for everybody, is that, if you were speaking as the chapter physician lead from the Rural and Remote Division, officially the spokespeople are myself and the board co-chairs. So that would be Dr. Tracy Thorne and whomever ends up being co-chair. In every instance that I can recall in my, 3 years as ED, I have deferred to the local physician leadership. Most often it's like a clinical issue, it's a service volume issue, it's something related to your scope of practice that you are the expert in and not me. Where I have been able to assist some physicians when they've asked is by providing like background information, this many of our chapters deliver babies, this many, blah, blah, blah. And if we've had a spicy meatball, sometimes we reach out to the Doctors of BC and they have a communications person with skills similar to Jim's that they can actually go through and coach you. So I can only think of one instance where I have been very concerned about what a physician member has said, and it's been about COVID vaccine denial, etc. So anyway, I wanted to speak up. Sorry, I don't want to take too much of the floor, but I just wanted to mention that it's not a punitive thing. It's like, I'm here to help. The staff team's here to help. We'll reach out to Doctors of BC for expertise as needed. So I just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, Catherine.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Alex put a very interesting question in the chat, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it as well. So what value, if any, is specifying off the record for giving background and opinions to guide the journalists? And Alex, please feel free to speak up if you want to speak to that as well.
I'll just jump in and if Alex wants to add to it, I would say very little. Nothing is off the record. I would use off the record. Most people who do what I do will say never, ever, don't do it, period. There is a time and a place, I believe, but the never ever is probably a very good caution. If you tell me, and the reason is that if you tell me something off the record as a journalist, I'm going to remember it. And then I'm going to be at a party in 2 weeks and I'm going to say it, or it'll be 3 weeks time and I'm writing my story and I'm trying to remember the background, and it's going to seep in because I couldn't really remember, is that off the record or was that on the record? I can't really remember. And all of a sudden it gets out there. So I would be extraordinarily cautious about using off the record. Most people, I would note, use it incorrectly. Most people, when you're talking along, you're doing an interview, it's a back and forth conversation. And then the subject says, okay, now this is off the record, but Stephanie has cancer, just so you know, right? The reporter didn't say it was off the record. The person sort of self-declared, this is off the record, but then suddenly we're back on the record. It's like, don't do that. Don't reveal that information. Don't say anything. I tell people, don't say anything you wouldn't in an interview, in an email, that you wouldn't be ashamed of seeing on the front page of the Vancouver Sun. Like, that is the test. Otherwise, don't write it. Don't say it. So yeah, so I hope that answers. That was a pretty definitive answer. I hope that answers your question, Alex. All right, let's move on. Not seeing anyone else here. So I want to talk about your audiences. You might be in your community. You might be in Galliano, and you might be in Bella Bella, Revelstoke, a pretty diverse number of communities here, and you're going to go talk to your local media outlet, your local radio station, and you might think, well, it's just CKLN, whatever, just local yokel radio, not a big deal. It's not like it's CKNW or CBC. I'm just going to talk to my, weekly newspaper reporter. I want to caution you about that thinking. It's great to do interviews. It's great to get your message out. It's great to build relationships with the media. And when you do that, we want you to think about what message do I want to communicate to my community, to my region? What is there sometimes there's an urgency to act. We're letting all people in Port McNeill know the emergency is going to be closed this weekend. You need to go to Port Hardy. So there's a real urgency to get them some information. But the reason I say not to underestimate the size of the publication is that there is more to your audience than the person that's holding the microphone in front of you or the person that's on the other end of the telephone. This is who I believe your audience is when you're doing an interview, or you're doing a keynote speech, or you're doing a Chamber of Commerce, plenary session on healthcare. First is that big broad audience, is the public. It could be anybody. You do an interview in Revelstoke, and Revelstoke's going to share it with Nelson, and Nelson's going to share it with whoever, and all of a sudden that radio clip is going to be all over. So the public is going to hear what you have to say. Same thing with one of our chain of newspapers. You might say it to Glacier. Well, it's going to go to all the Glacier papers or Black Press papers. So the public's going to hear that message. Second, though, is healthcare professionals. You might be only talking about, if you do an interview talking about the hardships of COVID on doctors and how we are overworked, we are underpaid, we are, so on. Other healthcare workers, professionals are going to read this as well, and they're going to say, "Hold on, I've done the exact same thing. I'm an LPN, and this doctor's talking all about himself, not talking about me." So just remembering that healthcare professionals will be paying a lot of attention to what you have to say. And finally, government. I say this so you have eyes wide open. The largest newsroom in the province of British Columbia is the province of the BC, is the government. They have over 300 people in their communications division that all they do is they write press releases and they monitor the media. If you do an interview on your local radio station and you say something provocative, you say something like, it's time for Adrian Dix and Bonnie Henry to hang it up. They've clearly mishandled COVID. It's time for them to retire. Right? You say something that's provocative, and just so you know, it's going to be captured by the government communications wing, and it will be in Adrian Dix's on his mobile phone or on his desk within minutes, on something that's that's hot like that. That is the way that it works. That their message, if you're speaking on behalf of your division and you're freelancing a whole new idea, you're being critical or whatever, government is going to be paying attention to this. And I'll give you one small example. I did this training, the very training we're doing here, but it was in-person training. So I had my camera and lights and microphone and stuff with another division. And they were telling me this story that they've got a Twitter account, but they said nobody pays attention to it. They've only had 8 followers on their Twitter account. And they put some tweet out on something, I don't know what it was, they put some tweet out. And within 30 minutes, they got a call from the health ministry saying, "Why did you put this out? What do you mean by this? We need you to take this down." And he's going, "What? We only have 8 followers." But he said, "Yeah, but we're one of them. We want to take him down." And so they took it down, right? So I don't want to suggest that it's Big Brother, that Big Brother is always watching and is oppressive, and it's not like that. A modern communication shop needs to know what is being said, how the regions are reacting, and that's what's going on. So I'm just saying, if you're going to do an interview, make sure you're talking to all these audiences. Make sure you're not going to say anything that is that you're going to regret in tomorrow when you see it in print. That if it gets wider play, Alex is case was a good one. Again, I don't know the details of it, but he said something, didn't realize it would grow, and then all of a sudden he's on the national. He didn't sign up to be the spokesperson, the national spokesperson on his topic, but all of a sudden he's there. So remember your audiences. Your audiences are bigger and perhaps wider than you might think. Does it all make sense? Everybody good? All right, let's talk about key messages. A lot of people, we all think we know what they are, but I'm not sure everybody embraces them or maybe understands them. As the blue box shows, there's a big difference between knowing your subject and knowing your message. We know that you know your subject. If you're going to be interviewed in your local media, we know that you're a doctor. You're going to have a white lab coat, you're going to have a stethoscope around your neck, and we know you're smart. But do you know your message? What is your actual message when you do that? Because when you're doing an interview, we want you to have 1 or 2 key messages, maybe 3, but that's it. Like, people can't remember more than that. As soon as you add more, it dilutes your key messages. We want you to have focused key messages, 1, 2, 3 max, and then that's it. Just go back and focus on them. If you start adding 5 and 6 and 7, it's diluted, it's watered down. I can't remember what you had to say. So the key message is that focused, sharp, clear message. Hopefully it's memorable and newsworthy. It's topical, it's timely. And I want to show how the message can work, what the flow of the message is. So, the message starts here on the left of this slide. It's that clear statement, basic, clear, and then just as this tree grows, we add a few proof points. We call it the magic 3. Here's a couple of points, 3 points that prove my key message over here. And then we get more granular as we go to the right. Then we can add more stuff. We can add more stats. And there was a poll done recently. And here's an anecdote that happened when I was in med school. And you can add all those things later, but you need to start with that clear message right at the beginning. When you do, and when you know your key message forwards and backwards, that key message. It'll save you, and I'll show you how it'll save you in slides that are going to follow here. But just one last slide, just giving you a real life example. Here's a key message that I wrote: patient safety is job 1. Right? That can be. It doesn't get more simple than that. Patient safety is job 1. Then you add a few things, well, listen, we got a culture of safety in British Columbia. We are dedicated to physician training. We have the highest care standard. I made this stuff up, but hopefully it's fairly true. But these are proof points to your main point. And then we add the more granular stuff. 95% of hospital stays are this. The problem is that too many people start over on the right of the slide. They start with the shiny new object. They'll say, well, on the weekend, a poll of Angus Reid found that 78% of Canadians who are between the ages of 25 and 54 found that 2/3 of the time, and then all of a sudden you've lost me. I've totally lost the picture. You buried me in numbers when you should be giving me patient safety's job 1. So I was saying somebody earlier, there was a story in the papers, it was about a month or 2 ago, that said something like more British Columbians at that time, more British Columbians were contracting COVID in hospital than were contracting it in the community, something like that. Basically painting a picture of hospitals being a cesspool, a place where you go to get COVID. And of course, I don't know if that's true or not, but you could use this kind of a message for that story, right? It's a COVID story. They come on, you're on the Gloria Makarenko show on CBC, and your key messages listen, nothing is more important to us than patient safety. That's why we have the highest cleaning protocols in British Columbia. That's why we have, and then give us some proof points around that. Not burying us in numbers and in numbers and recent studies and all that sort of stuff. That's good stuff and it can help us later, but it's that core message that we need to have. So your core message could be, everyone deserves a family doctor. That can be your message. Or British Columbians who have family doctors have healthier outcomes. There's a key message, and then give us those magic three, proving that that's true. So that's kind of like how the flow of a key message can work. So if you get lost in the interview, if the interview starts to go sideways and they start asking you about something else, go back to your key message. I just want to bring us back to the importance of patient safety, and then all of a sudden we're back at patient safety. So does that all make sense about key message? I got one more slide on key messages, and then I'll open it up if anybody has any thoughts. I can't underestimate the value of the key message, and sometimes you're going to have to craft it on your own. Sometimes Leanne is going to give you a key message and say, here's what the division said in the past. Sometimes you may be Leanne or somebody may have to call the Doctors of BC just to get a sense of, like, something I was dealing with not long ago was, and I wrote the Doctors of BC and said, what have we said on opioids, or what have we said on safe supply in the past? When you know what we've said in the past, it'll help direct you as to what you can say in the next interview. So the key message is a strategic exchange. It comes across as a conversation. Somebody mentioned to me, well, what about a podcast? A podcast, podcast is definitely a conversation. It's a 20-minute conversation. But the only reason you're there, being an invited guest, is because you are there for a strategic reason. They want to hear from a local doctor. They want to hear from Bella physicians and how you're coping under the strain. So you are there for a strategic reason. You need to breathe life into the stresses and the strains of your practice. So they allow you to tell you the story. They minimize the unwanted. They keep you between the fence posts so that you know what you need to say, and you know how to keep going, and they get rid of the extraneous. So the key messages are very important. Is there any comments or thoughts about the key messages before we move on? Look like everybody's good. I keep looking at, every time I look down, I see Alex's hand. I don't know if it looks like Alex is waving every time I look down. So all right, he doesn't look like he's waving at me, so we'll carry on. Anybody know what this would possibly mean for media training, bridging? Anybody know what that is? Any hands here? All right, I'll just tell you. It's dead simple. And really, I suppose the answer is almost right in this photograph. The bridge takes you from one place to another. It takes you from the question to what your response is. It takes you from the difficult question to the way you're going to respond to it, which may not be an answer. So bridging is a technique that can save you, can rescue you if you're asked that difficult question and you don't have the answer, or it's a legal issue, or it's a personnel issue, or it's just a difficult issue. It can rescue you. So this just explains the technique. And then I'm just going to show you this. Just take a read of these. I'm going to shut up for a second. Just take a read of these. They're all basic stuff. So you probably use these every day. You've certainly heard them on the news on a regular basis. There's a million of these things. I just put a handful of these. These are not unfamiliar. This is This is basic stuff. But these kinds of phrases are the ones that can get you back on track, can bail you out of a difficult question. You know, somebody asks you, you know, I'm going to look for somebody here. John, how much money do you make? Like, how much did you make? What was your T4 last year? So no, you don't have to answer. You don't have to.
I don't know.
You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that. But somebody asks you a question like that. The reporter asks you a question like that, and it's completely within the realm. We're talking about physician compensation. Well, how much do you make, right? But in your mind, you're going, I can't believe you just asked me that. Can you? I mean, what's with this guy? I can't. How rude to, you know. That's what your brain is going. But you have to respond. But you don't want to answer. So how you can just go to this list and just say, you know, hold on, Jim, let me just take a step back for a moment and remember that physicians in British Columbia get paid less than, and then take us somewhere else, right? No, but John, I'm asking you, how much do you get paid? Listen, I'm not here to talk about personal compensation. I'm here to talk about the way we compensate physicians in British Columbia, right? And all of a sudden, you haven't answered the question, but you've kept on track. You've got us back, but you didn't answer the question. And you know, I learned when I was in the legislature, you'd have a politician, you know, in an interview, in a scrum. There's multiple reporters asking questions, and they would respond every single time. You get back to your desk and you'd listen to the tape, and you'd say, damn, they never answered the question, right? It was so frustrating as a reporter, but it was masterful when you are the minister or the government. It's masterful communication because you're keeping, there's no obligation to reveal everything. There's no obligation to reveal how much you make and so on. So, so if you're going to do an interview, you're going to appear at a public meeting, just adopt one of these, two of these, three of these, not the whole list. Just think of a couple that you like and use them. And the one that when I do this training with CEOs and presidents and perhaps doctors, the last one is one that people are reluctant to use. Those people are reluctant to lose. I don't know, because they're worried about the next question, which is, well, hold on. If you're the CEO, if you don't know, who does know? And they're worried about that. You're the doctor, you should know, right? And I believe that audiences are very forgiving. Listeners are very forgiving. It's okay to say, I don't know the answer. I'll get it for you. But the real bridging starts after the period. What I can tell you, though, is, and then key message. So it's okay to say, I don't know the answer. I'll get it for you. Or I want to be completely accurate with you. So I'll call you back. But what I can tell you is, and then tell us what you can tell us, which is hopefully your key message. At the end of these three dots and all these phrases is basically your key message. Is you're going to loop us back to what you can tell us, what is important for us to know, not the personnel issue or the legal issue, the confidentiality issue, or the difficult issue, or the issue that's going to take us into a whole new territory. So those are the kinds of things that I would recommend you, and maybe you'll as you're consumers of the media, maybe that we've kind of broken down communication. Maybe you'll consume your media a little different. Maybe when you're driving home and you listen to the radio or watching the news tonight, you'll hear people use these kinds of phrases, and you'll immediately know they didn't answer the question. I can you know, it'll help you dissect what you're hearing in the media. So here are just a few additional tips for success that I would just like to highlight. I know your key message. I think we've talked about that, already. Know your key message, know them frontwards and backwards. And we're not some of these are very basic, like I mentioned. This is not, know that every British Columbian deserves a family doctor. Like some basic stuff, just know some of those key messages. Sorry, Erin, did you have a comment?
Yeah, not a comment, a question. Just are there certain types of questions to or questioning styles that might be helpful to be aware of, that you can think of? That was just something that I was reading a little bit about, and I was curious if you had anything to say about those.
Well, I always like to know as much as I possibly can before I go into an interview. So I want to know the publication. I want to know who's going to be doing the interview. I want to get a sense of who's who. And so, because you're going to approach, we'll say you're going to approach the interview a little bit differently if it's a small town newspaper with a familiar face behind the reporter's desk that you've seen that person 1,000 times versus Michael Smith on CKNW, who may want to push you, may want to go after you a bit. Or Stephen Quinn on CBC Radio, again, Vancouver, who can be prickly to deal with. And so I always try to figure out what the style is of the person who's going to report on the story or the publication itself. There's certain publications that the Doctors of British Columbia, their communications staff, won't respond to. There are reporters, I use that term, in quotations, they call themselves reporters. They're working for internet publications, and they're not reporters. They're not unbiased reporters. They have an agenda. And there are reporters, quote unquote, who have burned the Doctors of British Columbia repeatedly. So now the Doctors of British Columbia won't return their calls, if you are one of those who are getting bombarded and getting calls, I would rely on, as you'll see the second last bullet here, rely on the comms team of Doctors of BC to say, hey, I just got this call from this publication. I've never heard of it before. Have you heard of it? Do you know the person? And so on. And they can usually give you some reassurance. Yes, they'll say, the good publication, good journalist, don't be afraid. They're whatever. Or they'll say, be very cautious. Here's their last 3 stories, and they're not flattering. So those are the kinds of things that I think might be helpful. Leanne, did you?
Oh, sure do. Just wanting to pop in and just remind that for our physician members, what we would want to do is have a conversation within our division first, because oftentimes we can have the same thing happen in multiple chapters. And so we might be a little more accessible for you. And then in the event that we need some external advice, we do have that as a resource. But I just want to be super clear that Doctors of BC doesn't have to approve rural and remote division of family practice messaging. We want to be respectful because, of course, we are children of the General Practice Services Committee, and so we're funded through Ministry of Health and Doctors of BC. But ultimately, the buck stops with our board of directors, who have responsibility for our policies and give me and the rest of the staff our direction. So anyway, just a small but important nuance. And I hope that didn't sound controlling. That, my gosh, that's not my intention at all. Yeah, the physicians know sort of what is needed in community, and from a physician perspective, what's there. And we're here to help and support, and not, control your message or anything like that. Unless you want to say crazy anti-vax things, in which case that's a different game.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Acknowledging the problems, it's obviously you want to acknowledge the problems, you want to talk about the problems. Something that I have seen is there's not a lot of acknowledgement of the solutions or the possible solutions. So if you can talk about some solutions, that can help the narrative, and can take it away from doctors simply complaining or being seen to be complaining about issues, and actually being forward-looking, being the problem solvers that we know you are. So if you've got a solution in your local community, it'd be great to highlight it. Let's say you've worked on getting 3 retired doctors to come back to provide locum services or something like that. Well, you haven't solved the problem for BC, but you sure have made a big difference in your community. So promote that. So if you've got a local solution, great. Maybe you don't have a local solution that you can point to. It's okay to point to other solutions to give people hope. So I did this kind of a session with the doctors at Whistler, and they're doing that Whistler 360 initiative where the community comes together and they've got kind of a hub that the community has helped fund. So maybe you point to that, or maybe you point to Ucluelet, where you don't have a connection with Ucluelet, but the Ucluelet doctors were able to manage to get the health authority to pay the admin costs and overhead to retain those physicians in that community. So maybe you point to that and say, these are the problems we face, but there are solutions. Here are a few examples of what other communities have done. And maybe who knows, maybe you'll spark somebody in your own community to step up and help. Politics is a very dangerous thing. I would avoid politics and who do you blame? Because that's a normal question. Who do you blame, doctor, for this mess that physicians are in? Is this the NDP, or does this really go back to the Liberals? They're 10 years in office, right? Wow, what a question, right? That's a powerful question, and I'm not sure that no matter how you answer that is going to, you're going to be, I expect you're going to be in a lot of hot water, no matter how you answer it. So it's an area that just be very, very cautious. It's an area probably to avoid. Making it personal and sharing anecdotes and stories, those are extraordinarily powerful. When you can share a real life story, that's what's people are going to remember. And I'll give you an example of that. I was doing similar training with a group of physicians. It was in-person training, and I was doing a real interview, camera, lights, microphone, with a doctor, just like yourselves. And the story was about burnout. Physicians, doctors, family physicians feeling burned out, stressed out, etc. And so the doctor told me that she has been working 5 days a week in her practice before COVID. During COVID, she took on Saturdays as well. And then really in the last 6 months, she began working a half day on Sunday. And so I said to her, so she's working 6.5 days in clinic. And so I said to her, well, give me an example of how you feel the burnout. Like, give me an example. And she couldn't think of any example of how. So then I said, tell me about your family. Tell me what the burden is like on your family with you working so much. And as soon as I asked that, she almost broke down and cried, talking about the effect of her work schedule and her commitment to her patients and how the toll it's taking on her family, because she's still a mom when she gets home. She still has a whole number of mom duties. And that's when the story became real. That's when the burnout, you can tell me you're burned out, or you can show me you're burned out. And when you show, that's the powerful story that really is memorable, and people understand that. So if you can tell a story that works, that still fits with your key messages, that still fits with the narrative, that is very, very powerful. Being aware of recent developments is also something that will ensure you're not going to get caught off guard. Let's say you're going to do an interview. You're going to do an interview at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You're in your clinic all day long, and you've got to do an interview at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Have a Leanne or somebody monitor what's going on. Make sure there's no breaking headlines, right? That, oh, Dick's just said this in the legislature. Because if you get interviewed, that's going to be one of the first questions. So just be aware of what's going on. Be aware of what's on your front page of the newspaper. If you're doing a radio show at 8:10, make sure you listen to the 7:30 news and the 8 o'clock news. Get a sense of what's going on. When I did this training with the Whistler doctors, they had just had a call from CBC Radio, and CBC said, hey, listen, we'd like to feature this innovative plan, this Whistler 360. We'd like to do more. I'd like to tell our listeners what it is, how it works. And they said, great. So the next day they called And the interviewer on live radio, the interviewer said, and now we're joined by the doctors at Whistler 360. Doctor, you've probably seen Sonia Furstenau and the Green Party come out with their health platform. We want to get your reaction. Right. And the doctor's going, what? Like she didn't know. There was no, she hadn't been told. She didn't know that there was a policy. And so she had to do some pretty fast skating to get out of a difficult question that she had no background on. So if you're aware of what's going on, that can really make a big difference in the messages you deliver. So comms team, we've talked about that. And then finally, stick to your expertise, stick to what you know. Times you're going to get asked questions that are not in your territory. It's not in your, this is a question for the cardiologists. They need to respond why this incident happened, not me. So just stick to what you know, stay within your scope, and you'll be fine. A few more slides, but any questions anytime. I want to ensure that you walk away from this session knowing that you are the expert. You're not just another person. You're not just, man on the street who gets interviewed. No, you're the expert in this story. You're not a victim. You're not being led around by the nose. You are powerful. So you can carry that mantle when you're going into an interview. Carry that mantle. You're the expert. You're gonna, I have a message to deliver from my practice, or from my partners, or from my divisions. If you did get a call from the media, there's some basic protocols that I would recommend. Whether you get the call, your staff gets a call, maybe you're driving along and you get a call from a reporter. Ask some basic questions. What's your name and publication? What's your deadline? What's the nature of the story? What kind of questions do you have? Ask these basic, who else are you talking to? These are basic questions you can ask to get a sense of the story. And I think this goes back to, something Aaron talked about when you're asking about questions and so on. You can ask your own questions to get a sense of the story. You might find out very quickly, this is a story I don't want to be involved in, or this is a story that we need to be involved in, but it's not going to be me. Leanne, you take this one. So ask some of those basic questions. Don't do that interview right there. You're driving along, you can do the interview. Don't do the interview. Have somebody call back in 5 minutes and 10 minutes, then do the interview, or have them do that interview. So just some basic, some very basic protocols that can ensure that that 5 or 10 minutes can do an infinite amount of good, because you're going to figure out, what do I want to say? Do I want to be part of this? What have we said in the past? Maybe I should phone the past president and find out how she dealt with this. Or you can do a whole bunch of things during that 5 or 10 minutes when you decide how to handle the question, how to handle the request. Anticipating questions. Your answers will be stronger, I guarantee, when you anticipate the questions. When you think about what am I likely to get asked here? Well, what do people really need to know right now? When you start asking those things, try to get a sense of what people are going to ask, it helps you craft stronger communication, stronger key messages. So getting a sense of what and then think about stuff that you don't want them to ask. I'll talk about COVID, and I'll talk about safe drug supply, but I am not talking about this doctor who just resigned in disgrace. I will not talk about that. And then they worry about that question. They worry about, well, what if they ask me about him, the guy who just resigned in disgrace? Well, and they can't sleep. I say, craft a response to those difficult questions. Craft it. Hopefully it's like insurance and you'll never have to cash it in. But if you don't have the insurance, you're going to lose sleep. You're going to flip and you're flop and you'll worry about stuff. It'll throw off the interview. Craft a response to, if they ask me about how much I get paid, here's what I'm going to say. If they ask about the doctor who is just disciplined, here's my response. And here's how I'm going to get back. So anticipating question strengthens responses. And just this is the final slide, and then I'll talk about those key messages I mentioned. But final slide is you know, we've talked a lot. I've talked a lot about your words, your key messages. A lot of communication is not words. It's not messages. It may not be messages. It could be your tone. It could be if you it could be a whole bunch of different things. It could be your words, but you might be using the wrong words. Simple, direct language, free from acronyms, is the kind of language we like to see. I don't want to say dumbing it down, but kind of that's what we want you to do. We want you, when you're talking to the media, you're talking to your next door neighbors. You want to talk I mean, some people in government, they tell people write press releases for a sort of a grade 8 level, right? I don't know if that's right or not. I often say like a grade 10 level. So there's a couple of things that I've heard that I don't particularly like, that I hear doctors talk about. I hear them talk about, we need more British Columbians attached to longitudinal medicine facilities or something like this, right? And I'm going, that attachment that doesn't mean a lot to real people. And longitudinal medicine, that's an insider, in my view, this is just my own opinion, that's an insider term. Mention that to your mom, to your next door neighbor, to the person that cuts your hair, and tell them, hey, I'm doing longitudinal medicine now. And they're going to say, well, I thought you were a doctor, right? Because it doesn't resonate in the public the way it resonates in your own meetings. So be very cautious about the language. As soon as you throw in a longitudinal medicine, an acronym, you're cutting people. You're cutting people out of the conversation. So, energy levels, I would say, I often tell people ramp up your energy level 10 or 15% if you're doing an interview. Even if you get a cold and you want to be in bed, ramp it up 10 or 15%. It's only gonna be 3 minutes. Get excited about it. If you can't get excited about it, be passionate about the subject, how is the listener, the viewer, going to get excited or passionate about your topic? So ramp it up 10 or 15%, strong, clear voice, and get through it. And pausing is the one last thing I'll say. I mean, breathing can calm you down. Pausing, though, when you're asked the question, it's okay to be asked the question and then respond. That a second and a half, you're asked the question and then you thoughtfully respond. And it seems like an eternity in your head, but in reality, you're doing an immense amount of good in that second or second and a half. You're resetting your tone. You're figuring out what your answer is. You're finding your way in that second and a half. And it's conversational. It works. So don't just jump in with the response. Let the question asker finish their question, and then you respond. And it can do an immense amount of good in the final product. So that's the end of the main presentation, but I do have some messages that I can share with you. But any comments, thoughts about I talked a lot there. So is there any comments or thoughts about the stuff we've gone over?
There is a comment in the chat from Alex. So Alex, why don't I open it up to you to just walk us through your comment. I don't know if it relates directly to Jim's presentation, but would you like to speak to it? Is Alex still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Great.
Sure. I don't want to interrupt in terms of the presentation. It was a great presentation, very helpful. It was just a question in terms of a potential motion, but maybe that can come after. I don't want to distract from the discussion around his presentation.
Leanne, do you want to respond to Alex? Is that why your hand is up? Okay,
Yeah, but maybe, sorry, it came up a little bit after. Maybe Jim can wrap up his conversation and then, hi, Alex, good to see your face. Then we can talk about your comment.
Sure. So Leanne, how much time? Because I don't need to go over this. I can talk for 2 minutes and I can talk for 15 minutes. How much time do we have here? I know you got to wrap this meeting up. So I've lost you there, yeah.
No worries. So we've committed to our members that we'll be finished by 8:30, and I noticed that a few people, about 20, have already turned into pumpkins. So I think my recommendation would probably be that you wrap it up with, everybody that's left says it's gone great so far.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so give me 1 minute, and I'll just wrap things up because I did promise this, and then I'm gonna be done. Here are a couple of quick messages, and I can send these to Leanne. Here's what I was mentioning. I did 3 key messages for family division just from watching the debate around the province. The key message is right under the blue line. Family doctors are critical to the health of British Columbians. That's it. Then each of the things that are beneath it, you don't have to read them, are potential proof points to that. You don't read them all, but if the topic is business costs and so on, your key message isn't we have a lot of business costs and we only get $31 a visit and staff salaries have gone up. That's not your key message. Your key message is a value statement. We are critical to the health of British Columbians, but we're facing some struggles right now, our business costs, and then it flows into the business costs. So a very basic key message. Second key message, we are focused on solutions that are going to strengthen healthcare. And then tell us what those solutions are. Give us a couple. I mentioned a couple already. Maybe you point to the fact you're very hopeful that the discussions between the Doctors of BC and the Ministry of Health are going to result in a new compensation model, a new structure to support family doctors. That, there's a key message. And finally, this is one that was really I wrote really in reference. I heard a lot of criticism about UPCCs. There, I've just used an acronym. That the urgent care facilities are glorified walk-in clinics. They're overfunded and understaffed, et cetera, et cetera. So rather than have a key message critical of those, our key messages were, urgent care facilities are robbing family doctors from their practices. No, team-based care is important. Doesn't replace the family doctor. So it's really just suggesting we have an ecosystem of care here. Urgent care facilities are one of them. Virtual care is one of them, but nothing replaces the value of a family physician. So those are just 3 key messages that just show you how you can take big, complicated issues and boil them down into memorable lines that hopefully resonate with your audience. So that's enough from me, Leanne. And unless there's any final comments, you can wrap your meeting.
I thought I saw
Tracy?
Dr. Tracy Thorne wanting to wrap up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jim, thanks so much for that presentation. It's so helpful as a physician in community. I talk a lot and I think of myself as being kind of an expert communicator just based on how I deal with my patients and my community. And then a reporter calls me and I'm like, I'm not going to say the right thing. And it's so weird because in every other form of my life, I feel very confident. So this has been very helpful, and hopefully for other physicians, it is as well. I know in all of the communities that we deal with, we are the face of the system in our communities. And when we're asked for things, it's a lot of weight given to it by the public. And so feeling more confident in how we express ourselves is so valuable, so that we have fewer experiences of negative media stories like Nicole mentioned, and more stories where we feel heard and positive and able to say what we need to say to get the community to understand our demands. So thanks, Jim. I really appreciate your time, and to all of the other and to everybody participating. So Leanne, I'll kick it back to you so that we can wrap up, unless Lori, you have words, and we'll get going.
Okay, yes. Jim, thank you so much for that presentation. As Tracy and Leanne have spoken to, this was great and very informative, not only for physicians, but also non-physicians. Great takeaways. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet all of you, and I'm always available if there's any other follow-up questions. You can get me through Leanne, and I'm happy to help. So I'll bail here, and you guys can finish your meeting. But it was a pleasure to meet you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay, so I'm just reading up, Alex, you had put in the chat a recommendation for an action motion. I'll refer back to Leanne, but I'm not sure because our meeting has already been adjourned, that it's practical to do that now. Certainly would like to hear what you have to say, and then we can talk about how we can work this into next steps with the rural and remote divisions.
Okay, thank you so much, Lori. And yes, you are correct. So we've already adjourned the business meeting, and my mother would find it really funny that I'm like the voice of reason here, because I'm such a rabble rouser in general. But the rules say that we have to give the materials to our members for any motions they're going to consider 14 days in advance. So we wouldn't be able to pass a motion at this meeting, but we have a bunch of rural physicians here, and you had something that you wanted to say, and I've never met you before, so hi. So anyway, would maybe just love to hear kind of your elevator pitch for what you'd like to talk about, and then maybe we can have a little feedback in the room and determine sort of what are the next steps, and kind of go from there. So over to you, Alex.
Alex,
you're on mute.
Sure. I'm sure there's a number of people on this call who have experience working with physician assistants. There's a link that I referenced there by Dr. Catherine Smart, the past president of CMA in Maclean's this month. So yeah, no, it's just a motion. I put the text there, and it can be wordsmithed, but essentially that rural remote physicians in BC call on the Ministry of Health to allow physicians to hire physician assistants in BC, which currently we're not allowed to do, and is a major barrier to providing care. And I think of all physicians in BC, rural and remote, should be able to get behind this, because that's really where there can be as much or more value added than in any other context of having a physician extender like a physician assistant.
Tracy, would you like to add your comments?
I've never worked with a physician assistant, and I'm super curious about how it works and what that would look like. Nicole Bennett, I wonder if you can comment, because I know you have had the pleasure of working with physician assistants in past career work and through the military. So if you can comment for those of us who don't have that experience and don't know how that would add to our practice. Do you have any highlights or quick wisdom you can share with us about that?
Yeah, I can definitely just speak on physician assistants. So a lot of times there's confusion between the difference between a nurse practitioner and a physician assistant. So a nurse practitioner essentially works within his own scope of practice, while as a physician assistant works as a physician extender. So they're paired with a physician to do a multitude of different tasks, and that can range anywhere from primary care to orthopedics to plastic surgery to hospitalist work to emergency work. They are regulated, and I believe it's 5 other provinces across Canada. But because of the regulation work that's being done with nurse practitioners in the province of BC, we haven't regulated them in BC yet. I am part of a side hustle group that has been lobbying for and advocating for PAs for quite some time, in terms of like how we want to see them utilized in BC. And due to the health crisis now, they're very low-hanging fruit for the crisis that we're in. And I've worked with physician assistants all my life, and I find it hard to actually not work without them because they're so skilled. There's 2 branches of physician assistants. So essentially what used to happen in the military, who's been employing them for over 15 years, is that the military has a Canadian Forces Medical Services School that self-trains them. But there's also civilian university programs where physician assistants train specifically to do civilian work. And as I said, you start out, it's like a ball of clay, and you work with that physician extender to help you with your practice. I don't like to use the term SCUT work, but as an example, they are very helpful for things like the indirect patient care work. And they can also partner directly for you to see patients and follow up. Essentially, they don't work under their own license. They do work alongside of you. But with the right physician assistant, with the right physician, it's a physician extender that can be very beneficial. And I can see the practicalities in the rural and remote setting, given that the rural and remote doctor wears so many hats. So I do know a lot of physician assistants after 21 years in service. Many of them are working outside of the province or working privately for mining companies and up in the Northwest Territories. So we're really looking forward to pushing through some of this work and getting physician assistants back on the table for physicians to actually work alongside of. But I do welcome any specific questions.
I would like to know about your side hustle.
Well, I just happen to know many of the past presidents of the Canadian Association of Physician Assistants. You can actually find a lot on their website. We actually were trying to get them regulated a couple of years ago, but that took a pause specifically because there was no appetite in the Ministry of Health to actually entertain physician assistants. And then Alex Nataros came into my life and say, hey, I want to work with physician assistants. So we've recently just reignited that particular group. And we do have some people in higher places that can actually start lobbying and advocating for us as well. And this is based, of course, on working alongside of our nurse practitioner colleagues in a different capacity. In other words, we welcome everyone to the table.
Cool. Any other? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just in the wishes of time and acknowledging that there's still 33 people here who are giving us their evening. I think this is a very important conversation. So Alex, thank you for raising it. And Nicole, thank you for highlighting that there's already some expertise within this group around how we could maybe participate in this. What I think would be a good idea is maybe we could invite Nicole or Alex to join us at a chapter support team meeting, which is when the physician leadership of the division from all the regions gets together and with our staff leadership, and we can hear more from you about what avenue you're taking and how we could support you in doing that. And that might turn into a motion, Alex, but it probably would turn in more to something like a briefing note that we would then forward to the network of rural divisions, which is the provincial network that we work in, that involves all the rural physicians across BC, not just rural and remote, and then potentially escalate that up to Doctors of BC or to the JCC. So we do have mechanisms for escalation of good ideas, and our rural and remote division is actually quite known for trying to do things and get things accomplished. So if Nicole or Alex would be happy to, Nicole, maybe Leanne will reach out to you and we can invite you to meet with us in a different forum to kind of flesh this out a bit more and figure out how we can support it, because yes, we want to support these things. And whether, a motion at this meeting would have a far less weight than some of the other work that we can do if we work on it together as an organization.
Yeah, thanks so much, as always, for the support. It's very much appreciated.
Okay, do we have any other final comments or questions before we say goodnight?
Does anybody want to sing the 9 days of rural and remote Festivus?
Oh, I could never say it as good
9 CSCs, 8 shared care projects, 7 EOYs, 6 early draw, I forget, 5 LHPTs, 4 regional physician leads, 3 early draw NPs, 2 EOYs approved, and 1 CSC with their data.
Woohoo! Enjoy the rest of your evening and your weekend.
And a physician assistant.
Okay.
Very nice.
Okay, everybody, it's a wrap. Nice seeing everybody. And I really hope I get to see you guys in person one day and just.
Lori, someday we'll meet in real life. Lori and I have been on this board together for so long and never met in real life because of, whatever, world events, but someday.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Kate. We've appreciated your efforts on our behalf.
Okay. Mwah. See you later.
Bye.